Annette from LORI. So, Annette?
Great. Thanks, Ryan. It's really good to see at least the names of all of you in the sidebar. My name is Annette Duke. I'm a housing attorney at Mass Law Reform Institute. And today I am joined by Jane Edmonston, the senior supervising attorney with Community Legal Aid, Kiskea Addison, who's the new project manager for the COVID Eviction Legal Help Project at Mass Law Reform, and Joanna Allison, who's the executive director of Volunteer Lawyers Project. So the four of us are gonna update you on where we're at with the COVID Eviction Legal Help Project. And I am gonna start and share my screen. So if you can believe it, it is December 3rd. It's hard, that's a hard one to wrap my mind around, but oops. There we go. All right. So COVID Eviction Legal Help Project, otherwise known as KELP is what we're calling it. It was formed to really expand the existing legal aid organizations statewide, as well as to bring in the pro bono bar to address evictions during this COVID pandemic, which we expect will increase as we continue on during the pandemic. KELP is part of, as you know, a comprehensive response during the eviction diversion initiative. KELP's piece is to prevent evictions and to really stabilize people's housing during this pandemic. As many of you know who were involved with the Right to Counsel Coalition, it was really born out of a broad coalition that recognized that housing and the public health issue are completely linked. And also that the disparity of representation between tenants and landlords is very steep. And as you see on the chart, which is a little thin, but most recent housing court data shows that while 81.4% of landlords are represented, only 8.5% of tenants are represented. And while there's some variation statewide, this disparity has really existed for over a decade, and this response is really seeking to correct that disparity. So as everyone knows, the COVID cases are rising. It's getting a little bit more scary. It's a lot scary for tenants who are facing eviction. This was yesterday's or the day before's report in terms of new cases, 4,600. It's almost impossible to think about. And hospitals are filling up. So we're really at a new crisis point in terms of trying to keep people stably housed. The goal of KELP is really to achieve housing stability. And what that means for KELP is that we preserve people's tenancies, that we are preserving their housing subsidy if they have a Section 8 or a public housing, that we're helping them access rental assistance so that they can sustain their tenancy. And you will hear more that we are helping eligible homeowners stay housed. You'll hear more about that piece in a second. That we are able to help people access the supports that they need to stay stably housed, and that if they need to move, that we are somehow providing them with adequate and reasonable time to move if that's necessary. How will KELP help? KELP will provide referrals, most importantly, legal assistance and legal representation in housing courts statewide, where capacity exists, and we'll tell you a little bit about what that capacity is going to be. We will also seek to help in district courts and in administrative hearings to preserve subsidies, Section 8 termination hearings, and public housing grievance hearings. We hope to be there from the beginning of the eviction process until the end. Who are the KELP partners? So the governor has funded this program through COVID relief dollars. DHCD has contracted with the Mass Legal Assistance Corporation, which is administering this project. MLAC, as many of you know, funds legal services across the state. MLAC has brought in Mass Law Reform, and we will be implementing the legal services component of this, which will be representing tenants. and the Volunteer Lawyers Project, which is implementing a pro bono component to increase the number of lawyers who are able to supplement what legal services does statewide for tenants, and also to represent owner occupants in 2 and 3 family homes when they're evicting a tenant if their housing is at risk and they stand to lose their housing. Who is actually going to provide the frontline legal services help? It is 7 programs. It's community legal aid, which covers from Worcester all the way to the New York border. De Novo, which is based in Cambridge and is going to be covering Somerville sessions. Greater Boston Legal Services, which covers a huge area within the Beltway of 128. Metro West Legal Services, which is based in Framingham. Northeast Legal Aid, which is up in the Northeast. South Coastal Counties Legal Services, which is in the Southeast. And the Volunteer Lawyers Project, which is going to be doing the owner-occupant side of this and also the pro bono side of this. What the capacity that is going to be expanded is we're going to be bringing on more lawyers and paralegals who can help the lawyers manage the cases and do outreach so that we can make sure that tenants are getting notified that there are lawyers available to help them. The project is also increasing the number of intake workers that Legal Services has because the calls are going to start to increase. Who is eligible for KELP? Your income has to be under 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, and the eviction has to be COVID related because this is coming from COVID dollars. What's a COVID related eviction? A COVID-related eviction is if a tenant is facing an eviction because of non-payment due to different factors, such as they've lost their job or business. They have been unable to find employment. They're unable to work because they need to care for someone in their household or a family member, or they're helping children learn remotely. A COVID-related eviction is also a tenant who's facing an eviction because of non-payment, because of other expenses that have increased, utilities, food expenses, homeschool and supply and medical cost. A COVID-related eviction is also an eviction that happened after the state of the declaration of emergency, which was March 10th, I believe. And the eviction puts someone at risk of becoming homeless, being doubled up, losing their job, having their children's education disrupted, or facing an increased risk of exposure to COVID. That is a really important principle in terms of what is COVID related, because the last thing we want people to be doing is to be exposing themselves to the pandemic as we're going through this. The other thing that is a COVID related eviction is if a tenant is facing an eviction for alleged lease violation and it's related to COVID, including loss of access to medical care, for example, cases involving the Tenancy Preservation Program or social services, or they're facing domestic violence. What is not a COVID-related eviction, or if a tenant is facing a lease violation and it's related to a violent criminal activity on or near the premises, or it threatens the safety and well-being of a resident or staff person. But there are other legal resources that are available in these cases, and these programs may also be able to provide resources through non-KELP attorneys. So now let me turn it over, and we'll allow time for questions because I know you all have questions, but now let me turn it over to Jane from Community Legal Aid. Jane?
Thanks, Annette, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see many familiar faces and some new faces of the faces that I can see. As Annette mentioned, I supervise the housing work at Community Legal Aid, which is one of the organizations working under this initiative. And in general, most of these agencies have been around for a long time to provide free legal help to mainly low-income residents of the Commonwealth in matters that are non-criminal. So it's employment, family law, immigration, benefits, and housing justice and homelessness prevention have always been a core component of what we do. And this allows us to expand that work, and we're all hiring new staff so that we can ramp up and meet the need that we know is out there. The legal aid agencies are mainly going to be helping the income eligible tenants who are facing eviction. As Annette said, that's 200% of the federal poverty limit. You know, a lot of the COVID related financial assistance programs are up to 50% of AMI. So that there's a slight difference in those financial eligibility numbers, but they do tend to be pretty close. One thing to keep in mind is that the federal poverty limit is static across the Commonwealth, and the 50% AMI can vary by region. But just for the purposes of legal help, it's important to keep that 200% limit in people's head. And as Annette mentioned, we're definitely seeing and expecting an increase in the demand for legal help related to evictions. Since the state eviction moratorium ended, our understanding is that the calls to 211, which kind of newly have promoted itself kind of as a resource for housing related issues, that those calls have increased. The court filings for eviction cases are increasing each week. And certainly at our agency, the calls we're getting from tenants seeking help, those numbers have been increasing each week. This graphic shows actually it's not data points of an increase in time, but a snapshot over the past year of the types of reasons why people call 211. A little under 9% of them were related to housing. And of that group, over 50 were related to rental assistance. You know, some of you may have seen the signs on the highways that tell people to call 211 if they're struggling with rent or mortgages. So I think, you know, as we track these calls to 211, that housing related category will spike up. All right, Annette, we can go to the next slide. And I'll also say if people have questions as we go through it, the chat is available for questions, and Kisuke is going to monitor that chat. We want to make sure that we are reaching tenants as early as possible in their court process or in their eviction process, which often means that we're hoping to connect with them before they arrive in court. For most of us, that means we're taking cases as early as the notice to quit stage. In the past, those of you who are partners have sometimes known that we've only, you know, been able to take cases once they've hit the courts. And just know that most of us are really trying to be available and start connecting with folks earlier than that. For those of you that have existing relationships with your local legal aid agency, please know that kind of KELP or eviction referrals can still happen directly to your local legal aid agency, whether that's online or by phone or however you would normally make a referral or let someone know about a resource. There's also a new website, which Kisuke will talk about at the end of the presentation. So if you're unsure of which local legal aid agency would be available for a certain tenant family, there's a form that you can fill out and it will be routed to the right agency to receive it. And then of course, people can still use 211 as a way to get information if the other options are not as accessible to them. We can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to talk really briefly about the process and kind of give folks an overview of what the eviction kind of timeline looks like now. Many of you may know this, but it has changed because of COVID. Many of our court departments are operating virtually, which means for most cases, people are appearing in court remotely, and that has changed the way that cases are processed in certain timelines. So one thing that's always been true in Massachusetts is that in the majority of eviction cases, they start with a notice to quit, which is a letter from the landlord to the tenant which states the basis for starting an eviction and also gives a time period. So for example, an eviction case for non-payment of rent typically is a 14-day notice, meaning after the tenant receives the notice, 14 days have to run before the landlord can take the next step and file a case in court. There are, of course, exceptions. As all lawyers say, there are exceptions to every rule, and it always depends, but these are kind of basic general rules. So assuming the tenant is still in the apartment after the notice to quit runs, the tenant will get served with a summons and complaint by constable or sheriff. Before the moratorium and before the courts went remote, that summons and complaint would traditionally list a specific trial date, a physical location of a courthouse to show up at, and an answer date. The answer being the legal paperwork that a tenant can submit that lists potential defenses to the eviction or even counterclaims. So currently, that summons and complaint will not list a specific court hearing date or a specific court location to show up at. It will basically just put the tenant on notice that the next step of the case has happened, meaning there's officially a case filed in the court. Once it's entered in the court and the court dockets the case, the court itself will set up the first court event. The first court event is being called a tier 1 event, meaning the first event. And it's an opportunity for the parties to attempt to reach a resolution of their case, if possible, or to talk to the court about what they need from the court or what the court can do to help them kind of get to the next step in their case. Those notices, the court will then send a notice to the party of the time that their tier 1 event is scheduled. And this will be a Zoom event. So the parties will receive notice in the mail as opposed to by constable or sheriff of their court event. One important thing to keep in mind is that the answer is always going to be due 3 days before the court event. And the way kind of with delays in the mail, we're kind of learning that some of the turnaround times between when a tenant may receive a notice of a court event and when their answer is due to the court can be as soon as kind of 1 to 2 days later. So it's really important that folks are paying attention to those mailed court notices, reading them carefully. They have a lot of information, and making sure they're noting that answer deadline. If the case is not resolved at that tier 1 event, the court will then schedule a trial on a subsequent date, right? Again, before we were in this virtual world, it was anticipated that eviction cases would occur on one date, and the mediation would happen first, and if it could not be resolved, trial would happen immediately. Now, if it does not resolve, the trial will be set for a subsequent date. And just so people have a sense of kind of what it looks like or feels like to attend court virtually, again, as I said, each litigant gets a notice with a Zoom login, and that with a time, and that is how they should quote unquote attend court. It is court as if you were in a physical space. So people should prepare for it as if they would prepare to attend court in person, in terms of being ready and prepared. Depending on the court division and depending on what type of court event a person is appearing for, they are going to be greeted by a variety of potential different court employees. It could be someone in the clerk's office. It could be one of the housing specialists in the mediation department. By and large, they're usually, you usually meet someone, give them your name. They have a list of what cases are on for the day, and they have designated special breakout rooms for for specific mediations, for specific motions, and likely you will kind of be shepherded into a room, one room or another, depending on what you're there for. The legal aid agencies, as well as the Volunteer Lawyers Project, and some pro bono partners are really working hard to have a presence in court. Traditionally, many of you knew that or know that we ran many kind of lawyer for the day programs. And the concept was that if a litigant comes to court and they haven't yet connected with a lawyer, they have an opportunity to meet a lawyer in person that day to get information and advice about their case, sometimes to get assistance for their court event on that day. And so that is a very useful resource still, right? That people who have not yet connected to this resource or have an opportunity to do that. So many divisions of the housing court have attorney staffing virtual lawyer for the day programs. And so a litigant should certainly be encouraged to ask about the availability of legal resources when they first check in for their court event. And ideally, from our perspective, we would like to talk to the litigant before they go into their court event, so we can help orient them and prepare them and perhaps join them for the court event that they have scheduled for that day.
Jane, we have two questions.
Sure.
We have one, will there be virtual lawyer for a day for landlords as well as tenants? Should that be a question for Joanna later? And also, could tenants be proactive and file an answer or request for discovery prior to the Tier 1 event notice or not, because there's no entry date or assigned venue?
Yeah, so the answer to the first question, Joanna can fill that in from the Volunteer Lawyers Project. I will say some divisions have existing lawyer for the day programs that are being staffed by local bar associations for landlords. And some of those are still participating in the local housing court divisions, kind of outside of the KELP process. But we do expect for there to be a virtual presence for landlords, and I'll let Joanna speak to that. The second question was whether people should be proactive and go ahead and file an answer and discovery before getting the exact notice of their date. And my answer to that is yes, that there is no reason to not file an answer and request for discovery as soon as the case is entered and docketed. You do not have to wait until you get kind of the final deadline, but really the court can accept it anytime between when the case is entered, up until later. I will also say that, it is not uncommon for people to miss their answer deadline. It's really important that people try to meet that deadline, but they should know that it's always possible to ask the court for permission to file it late through motion, and they can consult with an attorney about that option. But the goal is to get those pleadings in on time. So early is good. And just to provide a brief overview of what does legal help mean, it basically encompasses a spectrum of potential services. And we're going to do our best to kind of match what we have with what a litigant needs, and kind of how much help they need to successfully navigate their eviction case. So it could be as simple as advising the tenant or the owner occupant about the court process, about their rights, about what to expect. And then they're able to take that information and navigate their case. We could help them fill out court papers. Most commonly for tenants, that's the answer and discovery paperwork that we help them submit. We can help them prepare for a mediation and also attend the mediation with them, help them prepare for hearings and trials, again, and also represent them at those hearings and trials, and represent them in negotiations with the landlord outside of court. A lot of cases resolve by conversations between the landlord and the tenant, perhaps with attorneys. in the in-between times between court events, right? And so we always encourage everyone to keep those channels of communication open in the hopes that we can resolve that. So we will do that as well. We're hoping that by staffing up as much as we can, as quickly as we can, that we're able to offer, every eligible litigant as robust a legal kind of assistance as they may need. But again, there may be some people who get advice versus some people who get a little bit more robust representation.
So Joanna, would you like to take it from here? And again, Joanna Allison from Volunteer Lawyers Project.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I see that there are 195 people here, so that's great. So VLP is going to be providing legal assistance to eligible landlords who need assistance in navigating the court process. And those eligible landlords are owner occupants with 2 or 3 family dwellings where the eviction is related to COVID, as per the definition Annette has already given, and also owner occupants where housing stability is at risk. So just a little explanation of that. Many of these landlords may not need to evict someone, their tenant may be gone, but because of not having payments for 6 months or because of losing their own jobs, they may be facing foreclosure. And so VLP will assist them oftentimes in hooking them up with a service provider that provides mortgage workouts, but also we've historically helped them with bankruptcies in order to be able to preserve their home ownership. They must be 200% of the poverty guideline or below. And the legal help is going to be available for these landlords on a statewide basis through VLP. And we're working on ways to get those referrals. If you are working with a tenant or happen to meet up with the landlord who cannot, who meets these criteria and needs assistance, VLP is the place to send them. We're trying to develop an outreach plan that will help us reach a demographic that hasn't historically sought help. So that's where some of the difficulty comes with this. Many of these owner-occupied housing are folks who are immigrants or second-generation Americans who don't really hook up with the same organizations that we're accustomed to dealing with. So we're trying to reach out, and some of the ideas we've had is sending out mailings as we try to get the landlords and determine whether or not it's owner occupied, sending out the same postcards that we're sending to tenants that we can assist. We're also trying to be reaching out to faith-based organizations, because a lot of times these landlords maybe can be reached from the pulpit of their church or the newsletter from their church. We're going to be reaching out to homeowner organizations that we have found historically cooperative and reasonable, which includes Mass Landlords and Mass Affordable Housing Alliance. REBA may also be an organization, but for the most part, those are larger landlords that will not qualify. We're going to be reaching out to municipal officials, city council people, et cetera, who send out newsletters and announcements, and also to the service providers who work with and low-income people to let them know that we're available to assist. Mm-hmm. This is not an exhaustive list. It may be exhausting, but it is exhaustive. And we are hoping for other ideas. And Donna Cohen, who's going to be working with VLP as our supervising attorney on the landlord side, is at this training. And we've engaged her because of her brain. And I believe she's going to be coming up with lots of ideas.
Joanna,
yeah.
Sorry, did you want to add something else?
Nope, I'm all set.
Thanks, Joanna. There's also going to be a lot of outreach on the tenant side. You'll hear more about that. DHCD is doing a tremendous job of really going to get the word out next week. And today, Quisqueya is going to show us the Kelp Project has launched a website that we can start to use and get cases referred to the program. So Quisqueya, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Annette. So Annette, if you could stop screen sharing
Yes.
so that I can share my screen. I have the fun part. I get to just talk about a new beautiful website that's being launched. So can you all see my screen? Yes. Yes, you can. Net says yes. Okay. Here's the COVID Eviction Legal Help Project, and we are launching it today. We're really excited that we were able to get this launched. It was in collaboration with various partners that I will talk about in a little bit later. But you'll see at the top, you'll find information at the homepage about find legal help, legal rights, and other help. I'm going to scroll through some of the pages and some of the features just so that you know that they're available. So we'll scroll down and you'll see links so that you can get legal help. There's also buttons so that you can find help with paying your rent, know your rights information, and find legal help. And these are resources and services that you can share with the people that you are serving within your catchment areas. Now I'm going to go to a couple of these buttons just so that you see what's out there. So I'm going to go to About first because I really want to show who are the partners that are making this happen, who are the ones who are on the ground, who are getting the work done. A question was asked earlier about Western Massachusetts, and I thank you for the person who responded. The Community Legal Aid is offering that assistance. So we have who is providing help. We have Community Legal Aid, which you'll see Franklin, Hamden, Hampshire. I'm going to show you their website, De Novo, Greater Boston Legal Services, Metro West Legal Services, Northeast Legal Aid, South Coastal Counties. I'm going to briefly just show you their website so you know who they are. So we have Community Legal Aid, we have De Novo, Northeast Legal Aid, Metro West Legal Services, Greater Boston Legal Services, South Coastal Legal Services, and also Volunteers Legal Projects. So we're going to see, these are the ones who are on the ground who are really getting the work done, and people are going to be able to find assistance with one of these organizations based on their zip code and their region. And then you'll see also the other partner information. I'm going to go to the Find Legal Help section because many of you are going to be asked to offer assistance in finding a legal service provider or getting a referral to one of those partner providers. So here you'll see the eligibility requirements. So as Annette has already mentioned, this program is serving individuals who are low-income tenants or owner occupants living in 2 or 3 family houses who are at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, and the eviction must be COVID related. And I'm going to just do one of the searches so that you can see. I'm a tenant. So here you're able to put in what your zip code is. I'm going to put a zip code, which is in Brookline. And you're going to find the first 2 programs, you'll see Greater Boston Legal Services. And so this person will be able to, they could apply, they could call to get assistance. And then we have the intake hours. And you'll also see the Metro West Legal Services for individuals who are over the age 60 or older. And we wanted to make sure people that have both of those options. So I'm going to go up, I'm going to go back. Sorry, one second. Then you're going to find legal rights information. Now, one of the most important things is that people are aware about the eviction moratorium through CDC. So we have resources here to click to find information to see if you qualify for the national CDC moratorium, which is going to expire at the end of the year. So we really want people to get a CDC declaration letter and send it to their landlord ASAP because this is going to be expiring. And so this is really important for you to share with those people who you are serving and community organizations, faith-based groups, anywhere where you see people who are going to be in need of this assistance, that you're going to be able to find them, finding them where they are. There's also information about other legal rights and information so that you know. Let me see, I thought a question. No, I don't see a question. Okay. And then you'll find additionally other help. Now, what kinds of other help? People are dealing with, may need assistance with rental assistance. They may need assistance with paying their utilities or food. So we wanted to make sure that these resources are available because a lot of times if you can stabilize some of these issues, it can also help stabilize people's home. And we really want to think of this as a holistic service and holistic project. So you'll find that information. You'll also find that you can call 211 for further assistance. Now I'm going to go back to the Find Legal Help page because I want to show you where you can find the referral. So you can make a referral to one of the 6 legal aid legal services providers or to volunteer legal services. You can do this by clicking on I am a community advocate. If you click on I am a community advocate, you're going to see this referral form. And here, this takes less than 5 minutes. You're just going to fill in your information, so your name, and also of the individual that is seeking assistance. So you'll see it's very simple. We try to make it as simple as possible. And this is going to send an email to the provider partner in that region so that the individual is sent to that person or provider, and they're able to get assistance with that provider. And if that provider is unable to assist them, they can get services, or they may be referred to another partner. But they will be able to find information. This will get to the provider organization. So you'll see, I think it's simple, but we do want your feedback. So you definitely can reach out to us. And my email is qaddison@mlri.org. And you can reach out to us with feedback, information about the website, about the referral form. If there's anything that needs further explanation, we're here. We're really here to support you. And I also want to show something that it's not a new resource, but it's been redesigned and revamped, and it looks pretty beautiful, I think. And this is for people who are having legal issues, and they may be other legal issues that are not COVID related, not eviction related, but they will be able to find information by putting in their information. I'm not going to go through this right now, but definitely check it out because I think it's beautifully laid out, and a lot of blood, sweat, no tears went into creating this and making this available to people.
Iska, can you also show on this page, if you're an owner occupant,
yep.
what happens when
Yep.
Yep.
So here you go. So you're going to see here, there we go. The Volunteer Lawyers Project can help landlords who are owner occupants of 2 or 3 family home if they're filing an eviction case. So you're going to be able to click here, and Volunteer Lawyers Project, I believe, yep, exactly. You have a request legal assistance online. So people are able to request assistance online, and they're also able to call one of the numbers for help. Okay. Is there anything else that we should highlight? Does anyone have any questions? I think I saw one chat question. Okay, well, thank you, Ron Freedy.
Kiske, if you want to
I'll stop
let
sharing.
me share the screen, I have, I think, a few more slides. Oops, bear with me. Actually, just one more slide. Hold on. Oops. Oh, well, we'll just do it that way. Okay, Jane, do you want to talk about what people can do now? Kiskia talked a little bit about the CDC moratorium. There we go. And really, you know, how we think sort of more long-term about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, right now, one major takeaway is if you're working with a tenant, or if you are a tenant, or with a landlord who are at the point of a notice to quit, please, you know, seek out legal assistance now, because we can help at that early stage. I will also say that the project includes not only lawyer staff attorneys, but also a fair number of non-lawyer helpers who are really dedicated to making sure that the litigants are able to access the resources they need to stabilize their tenancies, like RAFT. So that's why kind of the early referrals help, because we can start immediately with kind of helping that RAFT process work as smoothly as possible. One legal protection that people should be aware of is that while the state eviction moratorium expired, the federal CDC moratorium is still in effect, which you know, prevents physical displacement of tenants through December 31st. Different courts have different interpretations of kind of where in the process an eviction case might start or kind of be paused if the CDC does protect the tenant from eviction. But people should know that as of right now, that is a protection that's in place, and that is an important protection. I should also say that while we take cases at the notice to quit stage, that does not mean that we can't be referred a case at a much later stage, including when they get to court, as we talked about, but also even after a court case has been resolved, if there's any reason why they haven't connected with a lawyer and now they're at the final stage, please make that referral, and we're happy to kind of attempt to do whatever intervention that we can to try to save the tenancy at that point. Of course, people should be applying for RAFT and other financial resources now. One encouraging thing I will say is that because we are open for intake at CLA at the Notice to Quit stage, we've been talking to folks to see what they've been doing to, before they call us. And the vast majority of them have already applied for RAFT. So it is good feedback that the outreach around RAFT availability is reaching folks, and they have started those applications. And then we need to continue to educate ourselves and others about where the gaps are and what we need to do to make sure that we're really stabilizing housing for people in the rental market in Massachusetts. I know that one really important point of this initiative is to make sure that we're having regional discussions. Some of those regional discussions have already started and will continue through next week, those first discussions. So really we have those, the RAFT agencies and TPP and your local legal aid organizations are really coming together to meet each other and then to figure out how your systems work best for you in your region to make sure that we're all connecting to support people through not just this public health crisis, but this housing crisis.
Great. Jane, thank you.
So one more question.
Yes.
General question, either a landlord or a tenant has the ability to direct a case to housing court versus district court or BMC. Are legal advocates advising clients in one direction or another in this regard?
Jane, do you want to?
So the question is whether we're advising tenants to keep their case in a district or municipal court as opposed to housing court?
Housing courts versus district or BMC.
Or BMC, yeah. I don't think that there's any one answer across the board that we can give. I think, as all kind of legal counseling things are, it really depends on the circumstances of an individual client, what they need, what resources each individual court may have that would best fit their situation. So for now, there's not necessarily a blanket answer to that. I would again kind of say that if you are a tenant with a case in district court or you're working with a case with a tenant in district court, don't hesitate to make that referral because we want to help them as much as possible. And we also have attorneys working at all of our agencies that are doing housing work outside of the KELP limitations. So just remember that we're still doing our basic core work. So feel free to make those referrals. And I don't know if there was another second question, Kusuke, or
how might legal aid, legal assistant attorneys interface with other non-housing court mediation programs for cases that are either pre-court or not in housing court?
Yeah, that's a question that I'm not sure that we have teased out completely between the folks that are kind of engaging in the community mediation work and the legal aid agencies. I think that's something that definitely should be on the table in each region to figure out. The community mediations for the most part are new. I know that the district courts have been using community mediation somewhat, and that is being ramped up. So I think as we all learn a little bit more about kind of how the case flow works with community mediation, we can figure out how best to kind of interface, to use that word, with each other for each individual case. It likely is going to be a case by case thing, and likely I'll say probably our involvement will be more at the kind of court-based events if we're having to make decisions about resources.
Okay, another question. Would it be
helpful? I would
helpful?
just add one thing, that agencies can always make referrals. And so if you feel like a referral should be made, you should make that referral.
And this goes into that a little bit. Would it be helpful for RAFT specialists when they receive applicants with notice to quit or eviction notices to advise those applicants to fill out the CDC declaration, if applicable, and give it to their landlord?
So I think in most cases that's fine. If there is time to make the referral and let the legal aid agency counsel the tenant about whether the CDC declaration is appropriate or not, that's probably best practice. The CDC protections don't apply to every tenant, and there may be reasons to submit one are not. So again, you know, if there's time, I think it's fair to certainly advise the tenant that those legal protections are available, but not necessarily affirmatively encourage every tenant across the board to fill it out.
Right, and Kiskia, there's also some clarification going on about the federal moratorium that does apply to federal property that does go until the end of January. That's different than the CDC moratorium, and that covers federal properties. So thank you, Andrea, for clarifying.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? I didn't see any. Wait, let me see.
Okay.
Again, the CDC declaration, when there are protections, just so people know, that form is submitted to the landlord directly, not necessarily to the court. I mean, there may be reasons why that ultimately is part of the court record, but really that's a declaration form that as people are posting, Rochelle from MLRI posted a link to Mass Legal Help, which will also lead to a link to a form declaration. But again, that goes to the landlord.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I just, Annette, sorry, I just posted in the group chat the link to the website where we were posting the recordings and copies of these presentations on these websites. So if you go to the site now, all of our previous trainings are here, and then soon as some point later this afternoon, we'll post this meeting as well.
Right, and I see a suggestion. Can you put a link to the community mediation program? Yes, and that's the kind of feedback that would be great to have from you as a community that's, you know, on the front lines also dealing with evictions. So Kiskia, can you put our emails in there, because you can contact either me or Kiskia.
Yep. And I'll put a link to the website too.
Great, because we're all building the plane as we're flying it, or building the car as we're driving it. It's, you know, there are many pieces to put in place, and I'm grateful for all of the work that you are all doing now, and all of the work that you really did to actually advocate for more legal resources so that we could build the Army to respond to this. So it looks like, Ryan, is there anyone else that wants to chime in before we move on to our next Zoom call?
It looks like we might be good.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for your work and for being here today, and just stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.